Whichever version is true, officials of the North Wales province of Freemasonry should be able to help the police. They hold lists of members of both Catalan's Lodge and the Provincial Grand Lodge. We asked North Wales Police if they'd been to see the Masons to see if they could help identify the missing Mason. It took a month and several reminders before the force came back to us. A spokeswoman told us they had been to see the Masons, but that they had not been able to help them identify any of the missing offenders. What the force didn't know is that we had asked the provincial office of the North Wales Freemasons if the police had been in touch with them. They came back almost immediately to say they were unaware of any police action. Masonic headquarters in London confirmed the police had not been in contact. So had the police visit to the Freemasons come after Rebecca had been in touch with the province? The provincial secretary told us, "Your assumptions are correct." It seems as though North Wales Police took more than 3 years to go and see if the Masons could help them. And they only did so after Rebecca started to ask questions. Rebecca has now established that Catalan's Lodge is St. Hilary. He was also a member of a chapter of Royal Arch Masonry called St. Gogarth. Both meet here at the chapel that was converted to become the Freemasons' Hall in Llandudno. It's the major Masonic temple in North Wales. Catalan was also a member of an English lodge called Hilbury, which meets in Neston in Cheshire. He resigned from Freemasonry after his conviction. It seems North Wales Police have their doubts about Catalan's missing Masonic abuser.
Ketland would not cooperate with the police, therefore it's not possible to say whether there was a Masonic connection.
We went to talk to Raymond Ketland. Morning, Mr. Ketland. Paddy French from Rebecca. Can we talk at all?
Nope. Only through my solicitors.
Why are there two versions of the story, Mr. Ketland? Why have we got two versions? Why are there two versions of the story? Well, did you, in your police statement, did you tell him this man was a member of the same lodge?
No.
Not at all?
Not at all. It's never been said by me. If it had been from my lodge, my ex-lodge, it would have been easily identifiable.
Indeed, indeed.
Never mentioned that. He's never been in my lodge. Just one point, and that if I could find this man, I would find him, because that would give my wife closure.
Okay, I understand that, thank you.
That's it, but it's never, ever been there.
We asked the Crown Prosecution Service if they had made a mistake in their account of Catalan's story at his trial. They were not able to answer the question. This is not the first time that North Wales Police have had problems answering questions that involve Freemasonry. One of the lodges that meets here at Freemasons' Hall in Llandudno is called Custodes Pacis. Custodes Pacis stands for Keepers of the Peace, and it was formed in 1983 by serving and retired members of the North Wales Police. But back in the 1990s, a chief constable claimed it didn't exist. This is journalist Mark Britton. He was first told about the existence of the police lodge in 1995 when he was the editor of a North Wales newspaper.
When it was suggested to me that there was actually a Freemasonry lodge exclusively for serving and retired police officers, my first reaction was one of incredulity.
At the time, there was a new chief constable in North Wales, Michael Argent.
I thought that he ought to be made aware of the existence of a lodge, and then I wanted to know from him whether he thought that the existence of such a lodge was compatible with membership of a public service such as the police.
The journalist wrote to ask for an interview, and also asked the new chief constable if he knew about the lodge.
He told me that, to the best of his knowledge, having received my letter asking for the interview, that he'd made inquiries, and that, to the best of his knowledge, he could find no evidence of a lodge. I was shocked when he told me that he'd found no evidence, because I knew that it did exist, and I knew that I had a handbook which proved that it existed.
At police headquarters in Colwyn Bay, the new chief constable and the newspaper editor had a meeting.
I then said to him that I did have proof. I hadn't told him that previously, but I then told him that I did have proof and that I would send him that proof.
After the meeting, the chief constable did a little detective work of his own and wrote back to the reporter.
He accepts that, on the basis of what I've sent him, that the lodge does exist. But he qualifies that to say that that it only exists for retired members.
When Mark Britton insisted there were serving officers in the lodge, the chief constable went back on the beat.
Then the story changes again that, subject to further investigations, that yes, this is true, but they are only very junior ranking officers and so forth. So I mean, basically the story changed 3 times.
Mark Britton has never told this story. He admits he became a little paranoid over the whole affair.
I was disturbed. There were 1 or 2 things going on that concerned me in terms of phone calls and cars following me and a number of things like that.
2 years after this episode, in 1997, the North Wales Child Abuse Inquiry was hearing evidence. The tribunal had been set up because there were fears that child abuse allegations had not been investigated properly.
This was by far and away the most important story in North Wales. In my time, it was more than a story. It involved the whole fabric of society in North Wales.
One of the issues the tribunal was examining was the degree to which Masonic influence had penetrated the North Wales Police. Sir Ronald Waterhouse, a retired High Court judge, was the chairman of the tribunal. None of the police witnesses who came before the tribunal told him about the existence of the police lodge.
I believe that regardless of the role of that lodge, that its existence should have been made available to the chairman of the tribunal. And the fact that the existence of this lodge and the whole possible role of Freemasonry in the inquiry was played down just gave weight, as I saw it, to the possibility that there was a cover-up.
We wrote to Sir Ronald Waterhouse. He told us,
"The tribunal has said all that it could properly say on the evidence before it in its report, and that it would be both unwise and inappropriate for me to comment further."
This is the Edgar Rutter Temple in the Cardiff Masonic Complex in the centre of Cardiff. It's part of the South Wales province, which has a completely different attitude to secrecy compared with its North Wales counterpart.
It is difficult to describe it. We say openness. I think the Russians described it as glasnost, an opening up. It's not necessarily openness, but opening up, being more frank and not honest with people. I like to think we've always been honest with people, but being frank with people.
This is the latest yearbook for the South Wales province. It's easy to get hold of. Journalists only have to ask for it. It's also available in major public libraries.
Each province has its own way of doing things, but I cannot for the life of me see any reason why yearbooks should not be in public libraries. I wouldn't say that we want to go out and sell them to people, obviously not. But they should be there. The library service in South Wales look on our yearbook as a work of reference.
There has been no opposition within the province to the yearbook being made available to anyone who wants to inspect it.
If a member did not want his details to be entered into the yearbook, then obviously we would respect his privacy. but I am not aware of any member out of our 7,000 or 8,000 members in South Wales who was asked to not to have his details of his, and in some cases, his photograph in there.
The province is also prepared to answer any questions that journalists have.
The worst thing you can give anybody is no comment. Or we asked someone from the Freemasons, but no one was available. It has a level of conceit which is not appropriate at this time.
There is no police lodge in South Wales.
Would you frown on a lodge that was specifically a police lodge?
Well, I don't like the idea of it, no.
Why not?
Well, I don't think it's healthy. Freemasonry to me is a microcosm of society. I don't think it's healthy having people carrying their work, whatever their work may be, into the lodge, and it can, I think, possibly give rise to difficulties.
Back in North Wales, we asked the Freemasons what help they'd given the police in trying to find the missing Masonic child abuser. They didn't reply. We also pressed the North Wales Police to answer more questions about the investigation. In a statement, the force told us,
"We have no evidence of any outstanding suspects in relation to this case. There was some confusion in relation to a possible witness remaining unidentified, but we can confirm from initial and more recent inquiries that there is no connection with any Masonic lodge in North Wales."